Welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today we are going to be talking about a foundational principle about habits. Because whether you realize it or not, about 95% of everything you do relates to a habit. And we're going to talk about how habits will either make or break you. So let's get into the episode. Hi, I'm Jason Mefford, and you're in the right place to start transforming your career and life with this podcast. I've been in the trenches as an executive leader, and now I'm an executive coach and confidential advisor to executives all over the world. I use a multidisciplinary approach to improve learning that drives transformation by getting to the root cause in a practical, no-nonsense way. I love learning and sharing what makes people tick. You get both education and entertainment, since learning shouldn't be boring, right? But that's enough about me. This podcast is a combination of intuitive leadership, neural influence, and mental mastery to take your career and life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting to improve yourself, develop stronger relationships professionally and personally, make quicker, better decisions, and become a more effective leader, then of course, this podcast is for you because you are going to learn how to manage emotions in yourself and others, avoid burnout, stress, and anxiety, master your mind, get people to listen and take action, and become a lifelong learner. And when you do that, you will have a positive mental attitude, executive leadership presence, and the skills to know exactly what to say and do in any situation. I'm glad you're here. So, let's get started. All right, so today we're going to talk about habits. And, again, this might be one of the topics when you're thinking, Jason, why are we talking about this today, right? And I get it. I understand. We actually just recently had a briefing leadership program call. And one of the first sections, so again, this is a leadership program. This is for people who are leaders. And most of the time leaders, they're trying to say, hey, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? That's what they want to learn as a leader. But one of the first sections in that program actually relates to habits. And so sometimes people ask questions like, why is this even in here? Right. And what we're going to get into and talk about is, really as a leader, you might want to, kind of make people do what you want or get people to do what you want. But if you have trouble making yourself do what you want, then it's going to be really hard as a leader. And as I said at the beginning, this all gets back to a lot of our brain-based activity. And you probably heard me talk before that about 95% of everything we do is subconscious, habit based, meaning that, again, how we react to certain things, how we do things, how we go about our day, 95% of the things we do are not done with our conscious prefrontal cortex, but actually is a reaction or a response that is triggered in our subconscious mind. And so, really what ends up happening is we go through our life and we don't get what we want. We get our habits, meaning again, that those things that we habitually do will lead to certain results. And it's because of those habits that we have the particular results that we have. Now, to start off with, I just want to say, first off, there's good habits. And then there's some people that say there's bad habits. And most of the time people talk about bad habits. I instead like to say that there's good habits and there's habits that no longer serve us. Okay. Because again, throughout our life, I'm sure, again, as you've looked, you're probably like most people and like myself, to where, currently at my stage in life, there are certain things that have become routines. There are certain things that have become habits that I get into. I go to bed about the same time every day. I wake up approximately the same time every day. The first hour of my day, I go through a certain set of routines or habits, uh, pretty much most every day. Now, some of those things I have purposely created as habits to help me accomplish or get closer to where I want to be. Okay. But sometimes, again, we have certain habits that no longer serve us. Um, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, and we'll talk about how to kind of break some of those habits that no longer affect you as well. But before we get too far into this, I want to talk a little bit about a model called the logical level. And so if you have a pen and paper, um, get out a pen and paper. And what I want you to, and if you don't have that, then just visualize this in your head, okay? But I want you to draw a picture of a pyramid, a triangle pyramid. I think they're called isosceles triangles, right? The ones with 60-degree angles on all three sides. And what I want you to do is take that drawing and then break that up into 5 rows in that pyramid. And at the top, I want you to write the word environment. Below that, in the next one, I want you to write behavior. Then I want you to write skills. Then I want you to write beliefs. And then underneath that at the bottom, the bigger part of the triangle should be the word identity. So again, from top to bottom, you're putting in environment, behavior, skills, beliefs, and identity. And I want to go through and talk about this because, again, especially at the beginning of a year or anytime when people are starting to try to do things new, they'll often set things like New Year's resolutions or New Year's goals. And what ends up happening is about 2 to 3 weeks into the year, they give up. They stop the goal, they stop the resolution. In fact, about 92% of people give up on New Year's resolutions or New Year goals about 2 to 3 weeks into the year. And again, the reason for this is as I talk through this logical level and I explain to you how this actually works, you're going to see why that happens. And the reason is that in a 2 to 3 week time period, you have not developed a new habit. And so those goals and other things, if you don't make it past that time, there's a good chance that you're not actually setting up a new habit. Now, there's some misconceptions out there. Some people say, oh, if I do something for 21 days and it becomes a habit, actually, the scientific research shows it's 67 days. So a little over 2 months. And that's why in coaching or in programs like the Briefing Leadership Program, we do things in quarters, in 3-month sections, because in a 3-month section of time, you are able to break old and create new habits or new skills, new behaviors that you're going through that'll actually then be locked in, and so you will continue to actually transform and make progress. But again, before I get ahead of myself, let me go back and let's just talk about these 5 different pieces to this picture of the triangle that you just drew, okay? So the first one at the top is your environment. This is the environment in which you are in, the space around you, your house, the people that are in your family, your friends, the people you associate with. All of those things are in your environment. Okay. Now, underneath the environment come behaviors. Now, again, we develop certain behaviors. And again, sometimes those behaviors can be called, some of these routines or goals or things like that we're actually doing. But in order to be able to exhibit a particular behavior, we need to have skills, and we need to have beliefs, and we need to have an underlying identity. And so, what ends up happening again is most of the time when people are trying to either stop habits that no longer serve them or to start new habits to help them get closer to where they want to be, usually we focus our efforts on the environment and the behavior at the top of the pyramid. The problem is the real change and the real transformation actually happens from the bottom. And so, unless you get down to the identity level and you change beliefs, get new skills, and then work on the behaviors in a particular environment, it's very difficult for these things to stick. Okay. So let's again, let me go through and maybe kind of use an example now to be able to help solidify this and explain this to you in a little bit more detail. Okay. And of course, it's easiest to start talking about some of these habits that no longer serve us, because that's usually what people are thinking about when they think about habits. Oh, I have a habit of biting my nails, or of smoking, or of drinking too much, or of eating too much, right? Those are things or habits that people have gotten into that they would like to get out of. And what ends up happening, let me talk to you again and podcast. So it's going to be short today, but to give you kind of a little basis for this and why habits are so important, and why that's really how you end up making change in your life is we just got these are all unscripted, so I got to come up with some example now to kind of explain this to you. So let's talk about food, because I think this is one, again, if most adults, and I know in my life, I've gone up and down in weight about 60 pounds. So, I'm fully familiar with eating too much, not exercising, having different periods of my life where I was exercising, I was more healthy, I was at the weight that I needed to be at, I felt good. There were other times when I was not. Okay, so maybe let's use that as an example. Okay, um, so this would have been probably about 2 years ago. I was running every day. I was feeling really good. I'd gotten down, not quite to my ideal weight, but I was only about 10 pounds away from my ideal weight. And so, of course, in order to do that, I was having to work on the identity of I am a healthy person, and have the belief that, hey, even though I was overweight, right, that I had that belief that if I did these certain things, that I really was a healthy person. And really down at the identity and the belief level, that's when we get into some of the subconscious reprogramming and some of the other things that I talk about that we don't have time to get into today. But ultimately, that would be kind of the area down below to work on that way. And like I said, we'll talk about that different. So let me go back again. I'm going to rewind 2 years, when I was down, like I said, about 10 pounds above my goal weight. And I had the environment, I had the behavior, and I had the skills. I was running every day. I know how to run. I've been a runner since I was a young kid. In fact, I ran cross country and track when I was in high school. So I'm familiar with it. I understand, how to do it. I have the skills and the knowledge to be able to know how to run, how to train, the different ways to train, how to deal with your body, when you have aches and pains and some of the other stuff like that that comes on. And in fact, I had developed good behaviors of, going for a run every day. And I had built that into a habit to where I was getting up at a certain time, I was going out first thing in the morning, and I was going for my run before I do anything else. So I was prioritizing and putting that in place, right? And I would set the environment around me to be able to do that as well. So one of the things that I'm going to give you a tip on is micro habits, and I'll talk about this here at the end. Excuse me, when I'm going over the tips as well. But a micro habit, an example of that in this is, if I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to go out running first thing in the morning, there's some micro habits I have to do the night before to make sure I'm going to be successful in actually doing that when I get out of bed in the morning and I'm a little tired. So I would do things like put my socks and shoes downstairs by the front door. Make sure and leave out my exercise clothes. So when I first got up in the morning, the first thing I put on was my exercise clothes. I'd go down the stairs to the front door, see my shoes, put them on, get my butt out the door, and start running. Okay, so all of that was built in, and so really I had the skills, the behavior, and the environment, and I was doing good, right? I was watching what I was eating. I was exercising and doing what I needed to, losing the weight, feeling healthy. Now that was a phase in my life, right, where things were good. And what ends up happening sometimes, and this is why I'm going to talk about resilience later, but what ended up happening is I injured myself. I ended up overexerting myself and ended up hurting myself while I was on a 3-week vacation. So, right off, I'm out of my regular environment and out of my normal behavior that I had been, doing so good for a couple of years on. I was not at my home. I was on vacation, and then I ended up hurting myself. So, because of that, all of those patterns, those habits that I had developed and that I had been following for a few years, all of a sudden got blown out of the water. And 3 weeks is enough time to all of a sudden, I didn't have that habit anymore. And so, guess what happened when I came back home after the 3 weeks of vacation? I didn't go for my run every day. My legs were hurting. I was making excuses, doing other stuff. And all of a sudden, I found that I had moved back into a habit of being sedentary, sitting at my desk all day, eating, not really walking or doing anything of exercise. And so, guess what? I gained a bunch of weight back. In fact, I gained about almost 50 pounds, as a matter of fact. 40 pounds. There we go. Can try to do the math in my head. I gained back about 40 pounds as a result of that because I got out of the habit that I was in before. And this is normal in our lives, right? We go through seasons and periods of our life. So, what did I have to do when I realized that my weight was getting out of control and I was no longer feeling healthy? Well, it's time for me to stop the habits of being sedentary and of doing other things than exercising first thing in the morning. I needed to let go of those old habits that were no longer serving me, that had ended up having me gain a bunch of weight. And now I needed to actually start developing new habits to be able to help me get to where I wanted to be. And again, I've been working back at the identity and the beliefs level. We're not going to get into that on today's episode, but again, I already had the skills. Now I had to be able to work as well on the behavior and change the environment around me. And so again, remember those micro habits from before. I just have to make sure that the first thing I do when I get up is I get my butt out the door and I start going, right? Now, again, we talked a little bit at the beginning about good habits versus habits that no longer serve you. How do you know the difference? Well, if something that you're doing is not helping you get closer to where you want to be, then it's probably a habit that is no longer serving you. Okay, so let me say that again. If something you are doing is holding you back or is not allowing you to get closer to where you want to be, it's probably a habit that no longer serves you that you need to get rid of, and you need to develop a new habit that does help you get closer to where you want to be. So, good habits are those things that help us get closer and make progress every day to get to where we want to be. Because, again, as I told you, we don't get what we want, we get our habits, we get the things that we actually do. And so we have to create those habits to help us get to what we want. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. That makes sense so far, right? And as I told you before, 95% of what we do is all brain habit based. And so again, looking at the things that you're doing, looking at the habits that you have, whether or not they're getting you closer or further away from where you want to be, will help you to determine what it is that you want to do. Now, as I try to do on each of the podcasts, let me give you some tips, right, to walk away with this, because again, sometimes you may have habits that no longer serve you that you want to stop. And again, sometimes when we try to stop doing certain things, our subconscious brain is so used to doing it that when we stop, it thinks we're trying to kill us or hurt ourselves. Okay. And so it is in the background trying to fight the conscious thought of having you do something different. And so here is a little hack on that. You can do something called a pattern interrupt or use things like micro habits to help you either start or stop certain things. So, what is a pattern interrupt? A pattern interrupt is doing something that interrupts your normal pattern of what you're doing. So, for example, if we go back to the running example that I had, well, I had my shoes at the one place in front of the front door. Well, if you really want a pattern interrupt, put those shoes like in your bedroom doorway. And so as you get up and start to walk out your door of your bedroom, you step on your shoes and you see that they're there. That's going to be a pattern interrupt because it's something that's different, that's outside of your regular routine. And as you put those pattern interrupts into it, and then you start applying or doing that, right? So again, if I took my shoes and I put them in the doorway of my bedroom, when I try to leave my bedroom, I'm going to see them or I'm going to trip over them. If I start getting in the habit of picking up those shoes and putting on my shoes and socks at that point, that becomes a micro habit. So not only is it a pattern interrupt to stop me from what I was used to doing, the pattern that I was used to doing, but it also becomes a micro habit to help me in doing the new thing that I want to do. Okay. So you can use pattern interrupts and micro habits to be able to help you do that. Another one is when you start to have a thought, you move your attention, right? So again, let's say if maybe if you're a smoker or you're drinking Diet Coke or I don't know, whatever it is that you want to stop, every time you start to have a thought or a feeling that says, oh, I'd really like a cigarette, or oh, I'd really like a Diet Coke, you move your attention to something else. Okay. And so the minute that you are consciously aware of that urge or that thought, you automatically move your attention to something else. The easiest way to move your attention is to actually look around the room and quickly name 10 different things that you see, right? So I'm sitting here in my office and I could say 10 things: clock, Einstein statue, Mr. Rogers, tiger tooth, ball, water bottle, microphone, computer. And by the time you get through those 10 things, you have actually interrupted and moved your attention from whatever it was that you're thinking about. Okay. Another thing, the micro habits that kind of goes along with the micro habits is kind of a 2-second rule. If it's going to take you more than 2 or 3 seconds to do something, it's probably not going to be broken in your pattern. And so, for example, that's why in my office, you can see I have a guitar sitting here that you can actually see in the camera. I've got another guitar in the corner that you can't see, but they're sitting out. They're on a stand where I can see them, because in less than 2 seconds, I can turn around, grab that guitar, and start playing. So again, if I want to have a habit of playing the guitar, I want to make sure that it's within my reach or within 2 seconds. If I was sitting here and thinking, hey, I really want to play the guitar, but I have to go down the hallway to the storage room, open up my guitar case, take out my guitar, get it ready, that's too much time, and I'm probably not going to do it. So the 10-second rule that I use with the guitar, you can do with lots of different things, is a similar example to a micro habit to be able to help you, again, in starting or breaking some of these particular habits. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this week. But again, just as I told you to begin with, the more that I get into this, the more that I learn and the more that I have actually practiced this myself and have helped people using habits as one of the ways to help be able to transform their life. I'll tell you, all the willpower in the world won't get you what you want. All the wanting and wishing and dreaming in the world won't get you what you want. To get what you want at the baseline, you have to have the identity, the beliefs, the skills, the behavior, and the environment in order to be able to get what you want. And the best way to do that is actually by developing and sticking to those routines and habits. Because at the end of the day, we don't get what we want, we get the results of our habits. So with that, my friends, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on the next episode of Jamming with Jason. See ya. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you enjoyed the most about the podcast, and you may even be featured on a future episode. When you're ready to turbocharge your leadership development, join the Briefing Leadership Program, where you get access to everything in one place and can interact directly with me in the group. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy's video on-demand learning platform at ondemand.criskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you will also have access to hundreds of video on-demand learning opportunities. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.